Sophie, you're welcome for the next hour. Oh, I'm red today. I like the red. We've got Lux Alptraum with her new book, Faking It, The Lies Women Tell About Sex and the Truths They Reveal. Good friend of mine, sex educator, author, writer. You know more people who are transgender and sex workers and all of that kind of side of the world than anyone else I know.
I don't think that's saying a lot.
No, that's not true. There's porn stars who work here,
That's
but
true.
I think because you cover so many spheres,
Yeah.
the political side of it and the orgasm side of it, I think you've got full
I have my fingers in all the pies.
phrasing.
All the orifices.
Yeah, it's like a game of Twister with lots of lube. So your book.
Yes.
I was just talking to you, but can we see pull it back closer to you?
Yeah.
So we can see the cover. I love that cover.
Thank you.
This reminds me of, and I'm not trying to be glib, there was this ad years ago where a girl had her lip like that with her hand over it. I don't remember what company it was for. And what was fascinating about the ad is men looked at it like she was turned on and women looked at it like she was just hit.
Yeah.
And, so where did you come up with, not that this cover is obviously that, where did you come up with this cover?
Well, I'm glad you brought up that duality, though, because that was kind of what I was going for. So I just, as soon as I had the idea of the book, I knew that I wanted the title to be Faking It. And I had for a really long time this image in my head of these up-close lips that were being bitten in a way that was maybe pain or maybe pleasure.
Okay.
And that would kind of, but what gets even better about that, and you'll like this story because it involves fragrances.
I do like fragrances, as you know.
I was a little over a year ago. A friend of mine was in town. She wanted to go to this fancy perfume shop.
Which one?
It's in the West Village. I know.
80s.
Yes, that sounds correct.
AEDES on
Yes.
Greenwich.
Yes.
Highly recommended. They're carpeted.
So we went there, and I got bored very quickly.
Of course.
But she took
You
a
don't
very
like-
long
You don't
time.
like girly stuff. Like this looks like girl stuff.
But while I was just wandering around, I saw this it was this white package, and it had an illustration on it that was a woman's hand holding a mirror with lips in it that were very similar to these lips. And so I took a picture of it and sent it to my team, and I was like, this is what I want.
And they gave it to you.
Yeah.
That's a miracle, because a lot of times they don't like author input a lot of times it's good when they have no idea. Like for my book, they had no idea and they did what I said, and I was almost crying with happiness. So that's wonderful that it came out exactly like you wanted.
Yeah, in this case, because they had one that was like a woman with a finger over her lips, and I was like, I don't want to connote silence because this is actually about women actually speaking.
Yeah.
Not about like secrets. And so I was like, no, do this picture that I like. And that's how we got to this, which I love.
Oh yeah, because biting lip is also like when you're fibbing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was like, it looks kind of orgasmic. It looks like you're holding back, like you're in pain. Like, it's ambiguous. And the ambiguity is what I wanted to explore in my book.
So your book is all about the different lies that women tell.
Yes.
And this is obviously very much of the moment, because there are these, first of all, I think the right gets it wrong on this, because I think very few people on the left say believe all women.
Right.
I mean, that's not the actual expression. It's believe women, which means give people the benefit of the doubt when they're speaking out. They're speaking from a truthful place, which I don't think is that weird to say. I also think it's very disutilitarian, whatever the word is, to have this politicized.
Yes.
Because I don't see what Republican or Democrat has to do with anything if there's a rape charge or if someone's a douche. Because as you frequently point out, and many of your friends, these male feminists are just as predatory, and because they feel like they can get away with it as some douchebag frat boy Republican.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And, it's interesting. So when I started thinking about this topic, I initially was like, not surprisingly, thinking about women being accused of lying about rape. And I was like, why do we constantly accuse women of lying? I was like, it must just be this patriarchal conspiracy to keep women down. And then the more I started investigating just different topics related to sex, I was like, oh, wait, actually, women often do lie, but it's not for the reasons that we think.
So what are the reasons that...
So, I mean... The title is obviously a reference to orgasm and fake orgasm, which is one of the examples I think is really a great one to dig into. Because if I were to tell you no woman has ever faked an orgasm, you would know that I was lying,
right?
Because that's a ridiculous statement to make. But when we talk about why women fake it, this assumption is always, oh, women fake it because they're trying to please men, because they don't know how, because they're cheating themselves. This idea of like, oh, it's just about men, it's just about cheating themselves. It's because they don't know how to have good sex. And what I found in talking to many women and also in just being a woman.
Yeah, because you interviewed a lot of people for this book. This isn't just
did.
your opinion, like blah, 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 blah. This is...
I interviewed, like expert-wise, it was like at least 40 people.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people just talking about their own lives as well. So one of the things that came up is that, you know, a lot of people, maybe they can't orgasm at all and it doesn't bother them, or maybe they can orgasm and it's so powerful that they don't want to orgasm every time they have sex, or maybe they're having a one-night stand and it's not going to happen and they just don't care. But there's this assumption that a woman has to have an orgasm every time she has sex or the sex is bad and it has to be fixed. And this is this cultural pressure we've had.
But don't you think it's the men have this delusion? Because a guy, we know we've had sex when we come, right?
Right.
So we think if she doesn't come, then she didn't have a good time, and that's nonsense.
Right, exactly. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't give someone an orgasm if they want one, but there becomes this pressure. And I've been in this situation where someone's like, oh, we have to get you to orgasm. Like, we have to do that or it's bad. And it's like, no, it's fine. And they're like, oh, you're lying. And so eventually it's like, okay, well, I'll just fake it, because then it ends this. And I've maybe had the great sex that I want that didn't involve orgasm. And so that one is, again, it's like we have this social idea that sex is supposed to look a certain way. If your sex doesn't look that way or you don't want it to look that way, explaining that to people often doesn't go so well.
Right.
And so faking it becomes this shortcut. I mean, that's one of the more lighthearted ones. I mean, one of the more disturbing ones is when you look at something like virginity, which is largely an invented concept. It's like millennia or centuries or something ago, men were like, well, we want to know that the babies that our wives have are our babies. So clearly the women we marry have to be virgins so we can be assured of this, which is bizarre because, of course, she can cheat on you even if she is a virgin. But in order to assure her virginity, we have to find some physical sign. And there is no physical sign. But because people wanted to prove women's virginity specifically, they were like, well, there must be. And so they invented this idea that the hymen, which is just a scrap of flesh that may or may not remain intact after sex or maybe gone long before you have sex, they made up this idea that measures virginity, and then women get put to these tests that have no basis in reality.
But they have some basis.
Not as much as
Wait,
you
that's
think.
not a thing that the first time you had sex, you start bleeding?
No. I mean, for some people it is, but that could also be because you are scared and tense and not lubricating and you have painful bad sex. Like, some people don't bleed the first time.
Every woman I've had sex with bled. So I assume they were all virgins and not just my proclivities.
But it's like,
if she's not, see, you're talking about men seeking orgasm. I'm seeking blood. If she's not bleeding, she's not really coming.
But you joke, but a lot of dudes do that. Like, I've seen, there was this advice column that I was looking at, and the guy was like, well, she said it was her first time, but she didn't bleed, so she must be lying, right? I mean, you have literally enshrined in countries like these tests where you have
and I know
prove.
Belinda Carlisle talked about, she lost her virginity to a bicycle seat, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Like, you could tear the hymen many different ways.
Yeah, and some people, like, the hymen is not a specific organ. It is literally just this flesh that's left over after the fetal vagina is carved out in utero. It's just kind of a scrap of flesh. And so some people, it's really thick. And some people, it can actually regrow. Some people, it's this tiny little wisp of a few cells that, like, disintegrates upon first touch. Like, it's not a specific thing. And it's certainly not this freshness seal that's over vaginas. It's not like the vagina has a freshness seal that must be disposed of. There's a bunch of scraps of fabric, and they may cause an impediment or they might not.
So the title of this, I told you earlier, reminds me of the Martin Luther book on the Jews and their lies, which I know you'd appreciate. What are some of the other? So what was your reaction? I know that when you look at discussions of sexuality and culture, you are often rolling your eyes because even though you're hard left, you think a lot of the stuff that the leftists put out is just completely delusional and not at all based in a pro-female version of sexuality and gender.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I come for everybody in this book. I I think anytime we have this idea that there's one right way to have sex and have a relationship and one right way to be a person.
That's puritanical.
Exactly. And it's unhelpful. And I think that we see this from all sides with sex and sexuality. Certainly, in the sex positive community, which I am adjacent to, I would say, you run into problems where there's this idea that the more sex you have, the better, or the kinkier you are, the better. And people feel this pressure to become super slutty or go to all these orgies when maybe that's not right for them. I was once speaking at some conference and a woman was like, well, I don't want to go to orgies. Can I still be sex positive? And it broke my heart because I was like, you can have whatever sex you want. Like, the point shouldn't be like, are you having the most stuff? It's, are you doing what's right for you? And, and you see this with both like slut shaming and also prude shaming. Like, you see this with this idea, sex workers get it from all sides, where it's like, either they're devious, slutty women or they're victims,
right?
Because no woman could ever want to be this way. And it's like, but women can want to be all kinds of ways. And, I also, one of the people in this book is an asexual woman who for a really long time, like, didn't even understand that she was asexual and kept feeling like she had to lie and pretend she was having this great sex life when she wasn't having sex at all. And when she finally realized she was asexual, it was this huge relief because now she suddenly had this story that she could give people that put a context around who she was. And she stopped having to be like, well, no, I'm just like you.
Today's episode sponsored by HeshiSocks.com. I'm going to tell you the promo code. It's welcome30 for 30% off. You guys know I wear them all the time. They're my house socks. They're comfortable. If you're wearing typical socks, you don't get protection. They cause your feet to hurt. These are like pillows for your feet. So if you're wearing nice shoes or your feet hurt, you need Heshi Socks, Heshi Socks.com. They've got cushioning in the footbed, heel and toe for maximum comfort, arch support in the center. They're made with high-end Pima cotton, which is super soft and highly breathable. And it's antimicrobial, so it kills bacteria and keeps your feet from stinking. You got all the styles. You got the dress shoes. You got the sneakers. If you use code WELCOME30, you get 30% off. Now, I know you guys like irony. I'm telling you, Heshi socks make great stocking stuffers. It's like Inception. You put the socks inside the stocking, and everyone will be like, why are you getting me socks? And then you put them on. They're like, oh my God, these are amazing. So they make a great gift at a great price. HeshiSocks.com. I don't understand asexuality, and I want you to explain it to me, because from a hormonal point of view, right? Everyone, it's like I have to go to the bathroom, right?
Yeah.
So people are going to get horny. Like, maybe if they have a low hormone level, they're going to be dead. But that's not really the same thing as asexuality. It's more of a medical condition. What is asexuality, and how is that possible? And I mean, are they watching porn?
I mean, it depends on the asexual, and I'm not an expert on asexuality, so I can only speak to some of the things that I've heard. I would say some of it probably comes from having a low sex drive. Some of it comes from having a sex drive that's just not oriented towards other people. Like, asexuals do masturbate, or some do, certainly, and they might find pleasure that way, but just the idea of having sex with another person is not interesting to them. And there's also this whole like asexuality scale. So there's people who identify as like gray A or demisexual, which might be, I am interested in having sex with another person under certain circumstances. Like, in some cases, it's, I don't really have a sex drive unless I'm super, super attracted and in love or I shouldn't say attracted, but in love with this person. And if I have a deep emotional attachment, then I find myself sexually attracted to them. But not everybody has that. And I think a lot of it is just like, while there might be hormonal drives, while there might be like urges for physical pleasure or orgasm, it just doesn't necessarily translate to sexual intercourse with another person, fulfilling that drive or being something that's attractive or interesting.
So you just brought up something interesting, which is it could be a low sex drive, like a hormonal thing.
Yeah.
Where do you, or where should one draw the line between this is a medical problem and this is someone's personal preferences?
So, it's fascinating that you bring this up, because you've probably been seeing these like hers ads all over the subway.
By the way, this Lux was snarking once on Twitter.
I always snark on Twitter.
Yeah, there was a Hims for Hims.
Yeah, I hate both of them.
Right, and Hims had this ad of a guy with his hand, and he had moisturizer on it. And she tweeted, I was like, oh, what is this ad supposed to say? That if you take, I forget even that the pill was, you're going to come in your hand? I go, maybe it means men have dry skin.
Which is what it was for, but I only knew it. I only knew them as like the Viagra and baldness company. I didn't realize they were breaking into skincare.
Yeah.
But no, hers is their female counterpart, and hers is selling this pill, Addie, which is a low sex drive pill. And the thing that's
It's over the counter?
No.
Okay.
They're doing like telemedicine. It's
Okay.
not over the counter. Most of their stuff isn't. I mean, some of their stuff is over the counter, but a lot of their stuff is you just talk to a doctor.
Okay. But it's like those weed doctors. It's like, I got a problem here.
Right.
It's like a formality.
Right. And the thing about Addie is, number one,
How do you spell that?
ADDYI.
Okay.
I think the chemical name is flibanserin.
Okay.
But the thing about Addie, number one, it doesn't work that well. Like, if you take it, best case scenario, it's like 1/2 to 1 extra sexually stimulating event per month, I think.
Wait, there's a pill that you can slip to women that makes them horny?
Well, not really. Well, and then, so this is the other thing. So first of all, it sort of works. You have to take it every day.
Besides MDMA?
You have to take it every day.
Okay, you got to give it every day. Okay.
It sort of works. Like, maybe she'll want to have sex once more per month. But if you take it, you can't drink alcohol ever because it's like high risk of low blood pressure and fainting.
Holy
and that
shit.
risk is increased if you drink it all. You can't take diflucan, which is a yeast infection medication for the same reason. There's some other drugs too. It's just like, it could really put your life at risk. It's actually not safe to combine with other drugs. And it's like, so you can have a little bit more sex maybe. And, you know, for people who find it helpful, good for them. But I think like promoting it as this like universal solution is bad. And to go back to your original question, it's hyping this idea that just more sex is always better, or like we're constantly being told our sex drive is not good enough, or we should want more sex, we should be having more sex, we should this, we should that. And I definitely think that there are cases where diminished sex drive is part of a medical problem. Certainly, like there's some medications that you can go on that will reduce your sex drive. Although I think Addie does not work if it's a medication that's causing reduced sex drive. And there's certainly like, I think hypothyroidism, maybe. Like there's certain kinds of like medical conditions. But for me, with regards to sex drive, when it becomes a problem is usually when it's a symptom of something else. So there is something that is going on in your body and you don't feel great, and not wanting to have sex is part of that. So or maybe you're depressed, maybe you have a hormonal imbalance, something like that, where there's a problem more broadly where you just kind of feel crappy. Or if you feel bad about it, but you feel bad about it is also this thorny question too, because then the question becomes, well, do you feel bad about your low sex drive because you personally feel you would be happier if you were having more sex? Or do you feel bad about your low sex drive because you have a shitty boyfriend who's constantly yelling at you that you should want more sex?
Sure.
And so there's not like a number that I can give that's like, this is a medical problem or this is not. It's really holistically, how does it figure in to your mental state, your health and wellness, your feeling about things?
See, I'm also like you. I'm very, very liberal in the sense of live your own life, find your own happiness. The problem that I think I don't have an answer to is the human mind is very sophisticated at tricking itself. Mm-hmm. And it's if you're in a less than ideal place, it's very easy to rationalize that, well, this is just how I am. Whereas if I did X, Y, and Z, take a medication, blah, 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 because we're also being told that we're taking too much medication, everyone's overdosing, which is a fair criticism. Yeah. But on an individual level, that one person, that one pill might actually have a profound positive effect on their life. So like, I mean, you were a sex counselor. How would you help someone navigate through that thinking? Because it's also a chicken and egg thing. Because like if your hormones are through the roof, it's going to make you hornier, and that could be a good thing, but that could be a bad thing.
Yeah. I mean, so that's not necessarily the kind of counseling that I did. I did more like reproductive health and post sexual assault and stuff like that. But I mean, I think so much of it's a case-by-case basis. It's like, how are you personally feeling on a day-to-day basis? Like, how does this fit in? Or seeing sex not in isolation, but as part of this broader landscape of your mental wellness. So if you're going out and you're having a great time and whatever, and you're just not having sex, or you're stressed out because life is stressful and you're not having sex, like that could be perfectly fine. Like that, it becomes a thing of like, what problem are you looking to correct? I mean, that said, I will agree with you that like oftentimes we can have problems we are unaware of. I went over 30 some years without knowing I had OCD.
Right.
And then got treated and was like, oh, all this stuff I thought was normal was actually a part of my OCD, and I feel way happier.
Right, because when you're living a condition of any kind 24/7, it becomes your norm because it's statistically there 100% of the time, but it's not your ideal.
Right, but then it becomes difficult because with something like OCD, for example, you can't get better until you personally recognize it. And so like,
That's what I'm asking you. What techniques did you go through to self-diagnose or get it diagnosed that this is an issue I have?
With OCD, I just decided to go back to therapy because I was having a lot of stress in my life, and I had like just an explosive episode where I had a fight with some family members, and it was just bad. And I was like, okay, I am
not an explosive orgasm. No.
No.
That's the problem.
I went through that whole experience, and then I was like, okay, I knew I was going through a tough time. And I went and saw a therapist. So there was just an external event where I was like, I have a reason to see a therapist. I had seen therapists before who had never diagnosed me. And the fascinating thing was the whole reason I was able to be diagnosed with OCD to begin with was because my therapist asked me a question no one had ever asked me, which was, what does your anxiety feel like? Because I knew, I was like, oh, I'm anxious. I have this, I have that. And I had never thought about the fact that anxiety could take different forms. And when I started describing some stuff, he's like, oh, that sounds kind of like OCD. So let's do the diagnostic. And once he said, like, once there was a trusted source that said you might have OCD, I was like, oh, that makes sense.
What was the diagnostic? This is fascinating.
Oh, so the diagnostic, you can see parts of it online. It's really just like 2 parts, and it's all a bunch of questions. I think the first one is behaviors and the second one is frequencies. So it's like, do you have obsessive thoughts about cleanliness, do you have violent thoughts? Do you have this? One of the questions...
Who doesn't have violent thoughts? This is New York. You kidding me?
Well, then what is the frequency?
That's like saying, do you take the subway and not violent thoughts? Yeah, it's the same.
But then actually one of the ones that's actually really hilarious, especially because my therapist was gay, is like one of the questions is like, do you have homosexual thoughts? And I was just like, well, it's not a problem. And they technically
Did you write yes please on the form?
When they technically bring it up because it's supposed to be like straight people who are constantly like panicking, like, does this make me gay? Am I gay? Am I gay? So it goes through just like different types of thoughts that are like the kinds of obsessions people have, and then also like the kinds of compulsions people might have. So like, do you do this? Do you do that? And then the second one is they're like, well, you said you do this. How frequently do you do this?
Wait, I'm sorry. Something just registered. You're saying that one form of OCD is straight people having their brain constantly ask them if they're gay?
Yes.
But they're not even gay at all.
Yes.
They're just having OCD.
Yes.
So the answer to the question is no, but no matter how many times they say it, the brain's going to be like, yes, you're really gay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's horrible. Those poor dudes.
No, well, and it's like, I mean, because that's something like OCD.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
Sorry. One of the great lines, my book comes out in May. One of the great lines that I can't believe St. Martin's didn't cut is I said, are you gay if you're on your knees, but your heart isn't in it? And they left that in there. I was like, holy shit. The conservatives aren't going to like that joke, but go ahead.
But I mean, well, this is the thing. Like even before I got diagnosed, I had read some article once that was like, well, porn.
What's your answer to that question?
Are you gay if your heart's not really in it? I mean, there's probably not. I mean, gayness is not about behavior. It's about your own attraction. Like, if you get raped by someone of the same sex, that doesn't make you gay just because you engaged in sexual behavior. So if your heart's not really in it, no.
Okay.
I mean,
good.
unless your heart would be in it if it were a different penis.
Okay. So
might be.
This is very reassuring to all my listeners.
But
you're welcome.
But like in terms of like OCD, like I read something ages ago about porn addiction really kind of being OCD because it fits the framework where it's like you get very obsessed with sex being taboo or porn being taboo, but then like you feel the compulsion to look at it, but then you feel really guilty and you get stuck in this loop and this cycle of not being able to break it because you have this obsession and then you look at it and then you feel bad and then maybe you have to do something else. And it's not really about the porn, it's about the thought in your brain.
Yeah, that's the fascinating thing about OCD and how it's about, often people get it confused. It's like misdirection, because like anorexia and bulimia are forms of control, and they're very OCD adjacent, right? And you become obsessive about food and about your weight, and it's not about your weight. It's about control and having this compulsion. And the same thing. So the porn guy could think, oh, I'm just really horny. It's like, no. You have a compulsive behavior, and you think because it's weird, because it's porn, it's about the porn. It's like, no, porn is how it comes out. Just like people clean their houses obsessively. It's not really about the cleanliness. It's about the compulsion.
Right. And I think especially like with porn addiction specifically, having negative ideas about sex or thinking that porn is bad exacerbates it, because it's kind of like you look at porn, but that like sparks this cycle because you think looking at porn is bad. So now you feel guilty, but also that makes you want to look at it more. And like,
it's the same thing with people who have eating issues, which is they eat that pie and they're like, I'm a piece of crap. I broke my diet, eat the pie. Well, I'm useless. So I might as well cheer myself up and have pie. I'm a piece of crap. And it's that loop.
And so, and for me, I mean, it was really helpful. Like I was in therapy for like 6 months. I picked up a bunch of strategies. A lot of it is you name your OCD and then you yell at your OCD. So like I named my OCD Maya.
What were your compulsions though? This is very helpful to people, I think.
So for me, I didn't personally have, this was one of the big reasons why I didn't recognize it, was that I didn't tend to have like the classic compulsions. Like one of my compulsions was just, I had an obsession, I still have a little bit of, but I've tamped down mostly, but I had this obsession where it was like, if things in my apartment are damaged, people will come to my apartment and think badly of me. So I had like a nick on the corner of my coffee table, and one of my compulsions would be to cover it with a coaster so that nobody could see the nick. But a lot of it for me, there weren't, like I didn't hand wash.
That's like the waspiest shit I've ever heard. That's like fucking American Beauty. I'm sorry my house is a mess and it's like spotless. What the fuck? Where's that come from?
No, OCD.
Yeah. Wow.
But no, and I would, so it'd just be like things like but for me, a lot of it would also just be, there wasn't a lot of that. I would just get stuck in these like thought patterns and loops. And so because there were no compulsions, because I wasn't counting, because I wasn't washing my hands, because I wasn't this, it was like, well, I don't have OCD. But these more minor compulsions that I had, so actually,
it was more like obsessive thoughts instead of obsessive behaviors.
Obsessive thoughts were my big problem.
Okay.
There certainly were some compulsions, but it was like one of the things that I recognized, again, to go back to interior decorating, like there was a time
that's girl stuff,
when I came home and like the way that my partner had hung a picture was upsetting to me, because I was like, this is wrong, this is off balance, and I just like couldn't let it go. And I would like look at it and be very, very upset, and like people are going to come to my house and see this and judge me because like this is not hung correctly. And I think we like got into a fight about it, like because it was so upsetting to me, but I couldn't
articulate it.
I couldn't articulate why. I just knew that there was a thing telling me like, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. And now that I have been treated, like I will sometimes still get these pangs that are like, that's a bad thing, it's not supposed to be that way. And then I'm like, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, relax.
A lot of this, it doesn't matter. It's okay. Like some things you can fix, but like your life is not going to be over because there's a scratch on your floor.
Yeah, if you get the quick Kit Kats and you eat 3 and throw 1 out, you're fine. It's not ideal and it's wrong in a broad sense, right? But that's kind of how this works. It'll be completely disproportionate focus on things that maybe logically some people might have the capacity to understand are minor, but that's completely lost due to the illness. What's the term? Condition?
I think you could say illness.
Okay.
I mean, mental illness or condition. But it's also like, and then one of the other ones that I struggled with, going back to violent thoughts, is it's like violent or kind of taboo or abhorrent thoughts where you will maybe see yourself doing violence to someone you love, or you just become like very worried. Like one common one is like people will think about like poisoning their grandmother.
Oh, wow.
And then become very worried that because they've had this thought, it means they want to do this. And then when compulsions come in for people, it's then like you start changing your behavior where you're like, I can't be around my grandmother because what if I then poison my grandmother even though I don't want to? And I used to, that's one of the ones for me, because I haven't thought about it as much of late, so it's like coming back to me what some of my problems were. Was I used to have a thing where if I was like chopping vegetables for dinner, I would be holding the knife and my brain would be like, what if you stabbed yourself in the eye? And it was never a thing where I thought I was going to do it. But my brain, it would like come up and I'd be like, and when it gets really bad, like my OCD was just moderate. Like if it gets really bad, you become a person who's like, I can't touch the knife because what if I stab myself in the eye?
That's the first step towards the knife, stabbing yourself in the eye, right?
And and part of the exposure therapy that they'll do sometimes is, I didn't do this in my in my therapy, but some people will do a thing where your therapist will make you hold a knife to the therapist's throat because they're like, I know you're not going to kill me. And just because you have this thought about killing me doesn't mean you're going to do it. And part of your therapy is understanding you're not going to do it.
Yeah, if you could stop yourself from picking up the knife, you could also stop yourself from taking the knife and stabbing yourself.
Right. And it's a whole thing where, like, once you start thinking about it, you're like, oh, just because I'm chopping, like, it's not like you slip and fall and stab yourself in the knife. Like, there's actions you have to take to commit violence.
Right.
And so that's like part of OCD is part of like realizing like, oh, wait, like this isn't just because the thought came into my head doesn't mean I'm going to like murder the people that I love. And then once you start to realize that, then like the thoughts go away. Like once you stop worrying, then they aren't as frequent. And yeah, like I used to have thoughts where I would see like horrible things happening to people I love. And it would be like, oh my God, am I going to cause these things? And then once I realized they were OCD, it was like, oh, now I can be around my nephew and not like have these thoughts. I can just be normal.
Okay. This is another sponsor we have that I can personally endorse, crowdcow.com, and use code You're Welcome. So it's crowdcow.com/You're Welcome. Do you know where meat comes from? More and more people want to know. They solved it. Their goal is to get the very best meat from independent farms and make that experience convenient and fun. Not only do you know where your craft meat comes from, how it's raised, it's also healthy for you and tastes better. They gave us some. I brought the steaks to Thanksgiving dinner. Everyone was like, oh my God, these steaks are delicious. And I got all the credit and I didn't have to do any of the work because I went to crowdcow.com, use promo code You're Welcome, crowdcow.com/You're Welcome. It's $25 off. They send it the next day. It's not expensive, the shipping. It's in dry ice. You defrost it overnight. You bring it, you cook it. I don't know how to cook. It cooks up amazing. If you look at their Japanese Wagyu, I've never seen meat like this. It's like from another planet. It's exclusively sourced from Japan and better than anything sold anywhere else. It's the shamelessly luxurious ingredient of the season, I'm told. So for a limited time off, you get $20 off the olive Wagyu ribeye steak and the New York strip steaks for 25% off, grass-fed steaks. Crowdcow.com sources the best quality steaks you can't get anywhere in the world, and that's crowdcow.com/You're Welcome. I can think of one example of you causing horrible thing to happen to yourself. We were leaving a party.
Oh, I think I know exactly what that story is.
And in the lobby, there was a mural made of tiles. And it was an old mural. And it was like the New York City skyline. And there was a Zeppelin by the Trade Center. And you look at it and you go, hey, it's like a steampunk 9/11. And the next second, the sidewalk was somehow fucked up. You caught your foot. And it was like binary. You were 1 second standing, the next second your face was on the concrete. It was like a cartoon. And you're like, ah! And it was funny in retrospect, but at the time it was horrifying because it was so quick and it was such like justice. Oh my God, that was horrible.
But another part of OCD, which thankfully I didn't have this, is like when something like that happens, you become convinced, A, that you have magical powers, and B, that it's going to happen again. So then it's like, oh, I cursed and this happened. I can never curse again because everyone will die.
Well, no more steampunk 9/11 jokes. I think that's not a hard sacrifice to make.
I mean, I've told that story and not been hurt again. So I think I'm in the clear.
So we talked about some of the lighter stuff in the book. Let's talk about some of the not so light and the darker stuff, which is hard for people to discuss. So like, what were some of the other topics that you talk about that women lie about?
Yeah, so towards the end, it gets into...
Oh, can I ask a question? I'm sorry, because this is the one that does bother me. You were talking about how women, their lies. What I think happens often in relationships, and please correct me, and I think this is disproportionately with women, but also happens with men. We start rewriting history.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So things that you tolerate at the time, or when you're dating someone, they're quirky, And when you break up with them, they're weird. Or when you're dating them, they are buying you nice clothes and it's so sweet. And then it's like, oh, they're show-offs and they're profligate, right? So our analysis changes, although the facts don't change. And I think women often, the definition of a sociopath is the guy who dumped you, right? Like everyone, and every girl's a whore and a bitch who you break up with. So I think a lot, don't you agree that a lot of these so-called lies are, it's not rewriting history on a conscious level, but that our brain just kind of recalibrates our analysis?
So I think it's complicated.
Yes.
Some of it is your brain recalibrates your analysis, definitely. And I definitely think that your perspective on your relationship can shift. I think certainly one of the things why that strikes me personally. I'm just going to
say one more point, because it's like stuff you tolerate during a relationship, because every relationship is about sacrifice and sucking it up. When you break up, now there's no reason to. It's like, why the fuck did I do, A, B, and C, D, and E?
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. But I think where it gets thorny for me, because absolutely the grass is browner on the, once you've left. But I think where it gets really thorny is that for people who experience abuse, a lot of times part of the abuse is not understanding that it's abuse.
Yeah.
So you get stuck because you don't understand it's abuse. And like, I've had this experience where you leave a relationship, it suddenly clicks that it was abuse. And then all of these things that you tolerated, you look back on and you're like, holy shit, like what was I putting up with? Yeah,
this is a very, very big one. And I want to talk about this at some length because we all, first of all, the word abuse is used a lot and that's fine. But we tend to think, okay, I wasn't choked. I didn't have my jaw broken. I wasn't shoved down the stairs, or, everyone's going to have an insulting comment from their partner once in a while, blah, blah, blah. I was never crying and devastated, therefore it wasn't abuse.
Yeah.
And that is completely untrue.
Right. And I think like what happens, especially like you see people that's like, well, why? Everybody has this Hollywood idea of what abuse looks like. And everybody also assumes that in the moment, that it's abuse.
Right.
And it really doesn't look that way for a lot of people. And so oftentimes it can take like a year, 2, 3, 5 years. And I'm not necessarily saying like you realize 5 years later you were abused and the person should go to jail, but I think you should be allowed to process that experience and come to terms with it. And that doesn't mean that because, especially if you experience it when you're really young and you don't know what a healthy relationship looks like. I mean, that's certainly one of the reasons why people who are abused as children often end up in abusive adult relationships, because they have no framework for what love without abuse looks like. So, I mean, I think sometimes we overstate, but sometimes it's just we did not have the capacity to understand because it's a coping mechanism. You're like, I love this person. This person is now telling me I'm a piece of trash, but I can't love an abuser, so they must just be being honest.
Right.
And that was when I was in an abusive relationship. My partner said horrible things to me, and my coping mechanism...
did you see how those paintings were hung in your house?
Right? It was all my fault. Yeah. But my coping mechanism was to be like, oh, well, like he's telling me that other girls are prettier than me because he loves me enough to not care, and he loves me enough to be honest. Or he's like saying like really horrible things about me, but he still loves me, and he just like wants to be honest about my flaws. And like coped with all of that. And like, of course, when you're going through this, it then wears away at your self-esteem, and you're like, I'm a useless piece of shit, so no one else is going to date me.
Right.
And I'm lucky to be in this relationship. But then you get out of that and you're like, oh wow, all of that was lies. And I didn't realize it at the time, and I didn't complain about it at the time because I didn't think I deserved better. So
it takes courage to tell yourself, I'm in fact a useful piece of shit.
Right? But I mean, when it comes to this idea that women lie about rape, for instance, like the argument that I make, because that's really just the conclusion. The big argument that I make is when women lie, it's usually to deflect attention and to make ourselves safer. So like when you say, I have a boyfriend, do we do it at the bar? It's because that's the only way he's going to go away. And when you go and say, I was raped, you're bringing attention on yourself and you're subjecting yourself to harassment. And while certainly some people do lie about rape, there are instances of false rape reports. For the most part, if you know you're going to bring attention and harassment on yourself, it's not an action you're going to take.
But hold on, let me push back on this, because a lot of people, if they get to paint themselves as victims, then all of a sudden everyone is trying to be nice to them and be sympathetic and you know, be their friend and all this other stuff.
Some people, but I think a lot of times the harm, and I'm talking about like accusing a celebrity, for instance. If you come out publicly and you accuse a celebrity, sure, you get some sympathy, but you also get a lot of hate mail. You might pick up stalkers.
Sure.
You might get all of this. And the idea that like, oh, they're doing it for money. Like, you don't get money for doing this.
Dr. Ford got $1 million.
She gave it away, I think.
Did she?
Yeah.
Okay.
She like donated it to charities. But generally speaking, like, most people don't get money. And often your life is kind of put on hold or just really put in harm's way. And the cost benefit analysis on that is not great. I'm not saying that nobody would ever lie, but I think giving people the benefit of the doubt is usually good, just because oftentimes it doesn't make sense.
Or at least
lie.
a fair hearing.
A fair hearing, yeah. I mean,
think...
and also I think one of the things that people don't fully understand is I'm, generally speaking, a prison abolitionist. I am not saying someone said that you raped them, you go to jail now and your life is ruined. What I want, when I talk about like you should believe people who say that they were raped, I'm saying that person is saying, I feel harmed and I need help, and you should support them emotionally, you should listen to them, you should help them get therapy, you should help them heal. And if you are accused of rape, generally what I would, in a perfect society, I would say you should say, I'm so sorry that I harmed you. Like, what can I do to help you heal? And like, how can I learn from this to not harm someone in the future? Like, I'm not interested in punishing rapists, which puts me at odds with a lot of people. But I'm interested, I think once you take it about like someone who says they were raped is saying, I am hurt, please help me. And it's not about let's destroy someone's life, then the risk of believing someone, even someone who is lying, goes down dramatically.
Well, you know, I'm sure the pushback for that is, which is you're a rape apologist, and if he did it, and you know, you're not obviously not going to argue that people who are rapists tend to be serial rapists. It's not the guy does it once and then stops. And now, if any kind of bad behavior, even shoplifting, you get away with it once, it's like, hey, great, I'm going to keep doing it. So, what's your response to that?
I mean, my response to that is like, again, in an ideal world, I think there are some people who are maybe the portrait of the criminal rapist who cannot be stopped. But I think a lot of or the Harvey Weinstein.
Sure.
You know, like, I don't really feel bad about like Harvey Weinstein or Bill Cosby going to jail, because I don't think there is redemption for them. But I think a lot of cases, it is a lot more about what our culture tolerates, because you'll see things and it's not just like, oh, and suddenly he became a rapist. It's often like small offenses that are tolerated. It's like ways that men violate women's boundaries in small ways are treated as okay. And then that builds up because women have a hard time. If grabbing your ass on the subway is normalized, then like this is normalized, and suddenly like you don't feel like you can say no. And so a whole-scale cultural change is really what I would like to see. I would like to see more understanding that women can say no, or that anyone can say no, because it's not just women who are victims of abuse, but more understanding that like, being in a relationship does not define our success in life, because people get trapped in these things because they feel like they can't leave. More understanding that your sense of wellness matters more than the other person's pleasure. And just also, again, like when we talk about, for instance, like harassment at work, like taking it seriously. When people say like, this has happened, don't just give the guy a slap on the wrist, but actually work to create an office environment where everybody feels respected and people don't feel pressured to do whatever, or don't feel like they can't speak up about stuff. And I just think there's like a lot of non-criminal ways of handling this. Like, I'm a big fan of restorative justice, and I'm a big fan of just having this mindset that we just all want to be better, and that it shouldn't be who can we harm or how can we get back at people, but how can we all be better going forward.
Okay. Infinite CBD. The cleanest, healthiest, and purest form of CBD available. It's become more popular. You're seeing it everywhere. That's because it works. It gives you the benefits of marijuana without getting high. And we here at Gas Digital love working with Infinite CBD because it's the absolute highest quality CBD in the market. They have a double extraction method followed by refining the CBD. The end result is, it's a picture I'm looking at. It's like pure crystal. The products are over 99% CBD. Other companies use CBD oil. This is pure CBD isolate and is the highest quality CBD product, which is why I recommend taking it. Infinite CBD was founded after helping one man with Lyme disease become the most pain-free he's been in years. They're dedicated to improving everyone's quality of life through the power of CBD. And the research shows it can help you if you have chronic pain, if you got inflammation, anxiety, depression. Over 42% of CBD users have stopped using traditional medications. And their new release is Nano CBD, which is faster absorbing, and they have a detox that's great after a night of drinking. They've got holiday gummies made with real apple cider. Limited edition Infinite CBD apple pie asteroids made with real apple cider and spices for mouth-watering flavor. You guys know I like my trying weird flavors. So if you go to infinitecbd.com and use promo code YW15, you get 30% off. And that's easy to remember because it's confusing. So if you go to infinitecbd.com and YW15, it's 30% off. That's twice what you'd expect. Anyway, let's get back to it. One of the big things that, in terms of what percent of the population agrees with me, being the smallest, which I'm sure you agree with me, is it's very disturbing to me. And I'll make jokes about, the Holocaust and John Bonet and everything. It's and rape. I'll make jokes about rape. But it's disturbing to me how frequently people joke about men in prison getting raped, and they are not realizing what they're saying. You know what I mean? If you're making a joke about women getting Juanita Roderick or Bill Clinton and his proclivities, that's one thing because there's an understanding that this is fucked up. It's not an understanding that it's kind of insane that men are raped very regularly and terrorized, and everyone's just like, well, you shouldn't have robbed that bank. It's like, well, that's kind of a non sequitur. Yeah,
I mean, I got really grossed out when like Cosby was going to jail and people are like, haha, like now he's gonna see what it's like and get raped. And I'm like, that's not, like, prison is horrible. It's a huge human rights violation. Like, we should not have prisons. And again, I don't feel bad for Cosby per se. It's very hard for me to feel bad for a monster like that, but I'm also not going to be like, haha, he's getting what he deserved. I hope someone rapes his butt. Like, and I think, especially when you look at who ends up in prison, and that it's often people who had very minor offenses or people who did things that I don't even think should be illegal, like selling marijuana. Like this idea that, haha, you deserve to have your bodily integrity just violated is awful.
And you are going to be trapped in a place where it's going to happen repeatedly. So it's not like it happened once, you're in the bad neighborhoods, the hypothetical bad neighborhood, and then you're like, fuck, I should know not to go there. Not even excusing that. But it's like, no, you're locked in this house with this person. Yeah.
Although, I mean, that is a lot of relationships too. Right. So sadly. But going back to the book, one of the lines towards the end that I think is really fascinating to talk about. All the chapter names are lies that women tell, so it's all just sentence statements. And the second to last chapter is I'm on the pill. And I thought this was a really interesting lie to look at because we all know the whole women sabotage their own birth control to get pregnant, to trap a man. Like that's just like common knowledge. And again, that does happen sometimes. But what I think happens more often, although it is very rarely talked about, is women who lie and say, I'm not on birth control because they want to get men to use condoms.
Oh, okay.
And so I looked at that, and it's really interesting because I know that this happens. I also know that even women do not talk about it to each other. And I think a lot of why we don't hear about it is because there's this social shame. And this idea of like, oh, if I have to lie to the guy that I'm having sex with so that he'll use a condom, then I'm showing bad judgment by having sex with a guy who's going to try not to use a condom. Right. And I'm a dumb whore. And it's all of this pressure of gatekeeping that denies women the freedom to just go out and have a one-night stand the way that men do. Like, and like, even when men are like, oh, like this bitch like poked a hole in a condom and now she got pregnant, blah, 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 blah. Nobody's like, you were dumb for picking that. It's like sometimes people say that, but usually the onus is like, she's the villain, and never this like, you should have been more discerning about who you put your dick into. there's this idea that like men are allowed to have no standards and that's okay. Whereas if something bad happens to a woman, there's so much judgment around like, well, how dare you let him touch your precious flower? Like, how dare you share your gift with such a piece of garbage? And I am all for just giving everybody of every gender the freedom to have sex with whatever trash pile they want.
Right.
Because sometimes that's what you need.
It's one of the worst, in my opinion, pro-life arguments is the idea that if you do something, you have to deal with the consequences.
Right.
And first of all, that's simply false.
Yeah.
If you can file bankruptcy. So the idea that like if you run up this debt, you have to pay back the debt. No. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. If you can cut your losses and learn something, you don't always have to do that. That's one example. The other thing is there's an inherentness that like, well, the sex act is something you should be punished for, and the kid's your punishment. Or, I mean, they would say, well, why should the kid suffer the consequences of your judgment? And that's fine. But again, that's begging the question that this is a kid.
Right.
And the idea of viewing a kid as a consequence, to me, is a very weird way of morally phrasing it.
Right. I mean, I would say...
And also just think that like 10 minutes of pleasure now means you have an 18-year commitment to another being. Yeah. That does not seem like proportionate consequentialism.
Right. And I mean, I would say having an abortion is the responsible taking care of things and dealing with the consequences, quite frankly. But yeah, no, I find it really, really, I mean, it is Puritan, probably. It's certainly this kind of like Western European mindset about the denial of pleasure, about pleasure inherently being bad. I read some article that it might have been Jennifer Aitley's book about Chinese food, but there was something in it about how Western food was not properly spiced because there was this idea that like spices were sinful.
Right.
And like exciting the senses was bad. And there's this whole idea about asceticism being some kind of higher calling. And again, if that's fulfilling for you, great. But some of us like to have spiced food, and some of us like to have sex and like to be responsible enough to not bring an unwanted child into the world. But this idea that you should be punished, or that it is something that has to be taken unbelievably seriously every time you engage in it, that it can never just be for pleasure or to blow off steam or stress release, is so... It's just abhorrent to me. And the fact that women unfairly bear that burden, where it's like, well, men can go release steam, but women are supposed to be pure and virtuous, and how dare they ever do something stupid just because it was kind of fun.
Right. Yeah. It's okay sometimes to be stupid.
Yeah. That's how you learn. That's how you grow. I mean, and definitely I think when we see like all this about like dating, and there's this idea that like your perfect scenario is you meet someone when you're 17 and you fall in love and you marry them and you only have sex with them, and that's perfect. And I'm like, that sounds really bad. I mean, I'm happy for people who that's their life, but I think there's something really beautiful about trial and error and seeing what is out there and figuring out what you like. And
can I use that quote you told me about the first date in your policy?
Oh God, sure.
One of the funniest things you've ever said. This is how sex positive you are. You were talking about someone, I don't remember who, and you just snapped. You go, see, this is why I insist on sex on the first date. But your point, which I think maybe, obviously that's not for everybody.
Yeah,
but your
of course.
point is, the broader point stands, which is having a healthy sex life is necessary, if not, or close to necessary, for a long-term healthy relationship.
Yeah, I mean... And I would say having some degree of sexual compatibility, which could just be, we don't want to have sex at all. It could be, it's just good to know that you're on the same page about that portion of your life, whatever that looks like. And it could be we're both like wild and crazy and constantly doing it. We're both never doing it. We both really only want to have missionary sex. Like, it's all fine. But I think you should know that you have some shared ground there.
One of the things, you were the first person to teach me the word cisgender.
Oh, was I?
Yeah, because you were kind of complaining about it, like, how's that a thing?
I got over that.
Yeah, obviously. So the question, I'm sure you saw Twitter now, is cracking down on dead naming.
Interesting.
Yeah, did you not see this?
Oh, wait, I think I did.
Yeah, Jack Dorsey said they're going to start banning people for dead naming, and the people on the right flipped out. Can you explain to people what dead naming is and why it's a bad thing?
Yeah. Well, and actually, even though neither of us is trans, I think what I'm about to say is something that both of us can relate to.
Absolutely.
So dead naming is when you call someone, in this case a transgender person, by the name they were born with or used to go by, and not by the name that they publicly go by. So to use an example,
Bruce
right,
Jenner's the
exactly.
opposite,
I was going
right.
to say this one, it's all in the public, whatever. If I were to start calling Caitlyn Jenner Bruce Jenner, and if I were to insist, blah, blah, that person's a man, that's Bruce Jenner, I don't care. They're not Caitlyn. I'm never going to call them Caitlyn. That would be dead naming.
And here's the other thing for people to wrap their heads around. It's okay for a guy to be named Caitlyn.
Also that.
It's okay if a guy puts on a dress, maybe it's weird. That doesn't make him a woman. It makes him a guy in a dress. So the people who don't think transgenderism is a thing, which is a fine position. If your position is, this is just a dude in a dress, okay, this is just a dude who took on a girl's name, Alice Cooper. Do you have a problem calling him Alice? Call him Alice.
Right. So dead naming, and I assume the reason why Twitter banned it is because it's often used as a way to harass and cause pain. And I would say, just even beyond the issue of trans identities, people choose the names that they want to be called. It would be kind of shitty to, if Muhammad Ali was on Twitter, to constantly tweet at him and be like, hey Cassius, because he doesn't go by Cassius Clay. He goes by Muhammad Ali. That is a name that he has picked for whatever reasons, and that's how he wants to be called. Or I'm trying to think of like some other famous... It's harder for me to take like Diddy seriously,
Sure, yeah, right.
or like... But like, you know, a lot of people, they change their name. And they change their name for whatever reason. Maybe they change their name because their parents are someone they don't like, and it's like very painful to be called by the name that their parents called them. Maybe they changed their name because, like Muhammad Ali, they converted to a new religion and this is religious significance. Maybe whatever. There's all different reasons, even beyond gender, where somebody says, here is my name, and then to not call them that is just kind of being disrespectful and shitty.
There was when Bruce Jenner, I just did it, Caitlyn Jenner, that was not even intentional, recently came out against Trump saying, like, look, I thought he was going to be okay, but he's really trying to destroy the transgender community.
Yeah.
A lot of people who are ostensibly trans-friendly were like, what the fuck did you expect, Bruce? And we're doing that. And I saw some, like, lefty or trans person saying, like, just because Caitlyn Jenner is a piece of shit doesn't give you an excuse to dead name her.
Right. Well, and this has been like the ongoing thing because most people that I know who are trans don't like Caitlyn Jenner and never liked Caitlyn Jenner because she is a spoiled, rich white lady who kind of sucks and is really had a trans awakening because it mattered to her and not because of any commitment more broadly.
Right.
But from the very beginning, ever since she came out, people have said just because she's a shitty person doesn't mean that it's okay to call her Bruce. Doesn't mean that it's okay to say that she's not really a woman. Like, that's just harming all of us. And because usually when people are like, oh, but I don't like her, it's like, right, but you are now promoting the idea that it's okay to do this. And I think like with name stuff, we should all have a right to say, this is what I want to be called. And yeah, like, I don't like it when people are like, oh, is that your real name? Blah, 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 blah. Like, oh, like, I think if somebody says, here is my name.
But don't you just tell them it is my real name? It's just not my birth name.
Sometimes I say that. Sometimes I just say, yes, it is. Like, I forget who it was. Somebody was like,
can I still call you Joey Hardcore?
Yeah, of course. You can always call me my roller derby name. But there was like some question, somebody was, I remember. It doesn't matter who it was. But I called someone to interview them for a piece. And as we were getting started, he's just like, so is that your real name? And I was just like, yes. Because it was just like, are you just trying to throw me off balance? Are you trying to make me uncomfortable? Like, what is the purpose of that question except to potentially upset me? And if you're just trying to upset me, like, why should I even want to continue talking to you? And I just think, like, I don't understand why it's hard for people to understand that, like, asking about people's names or questioning somebody's name is maybe not gonna be what they want to deal with.
Hold on. I would think your whole work, everything you talk about, shows you the profound lack of empathy most people have. And by empathy, I mean the ability to see things through somebody else's shoes.
Yeah.
Especially with regard to sexuality. This is the most obvious one, where it's like, well, I've given no thought to my sex, how I like sex. Therefore, it's universally normal, and anything outside this is weird and bad. I had a friend who you had met and you had a very bad experience with right when you met them, who basically said like rough sex is akin to like shitting in someone's mouth, and it's just like, dude, that's like adjacent to missionary. That's like one standard deviation, no pun intended, from vanilla sex. But because that's not his thing, he couldn't wrap his head around how this is something that no one thinks is weird but you.
Right. No, I mean...
And it doesn't have to be ritualized. No one's talking about, bolting someone to the wall and getting cat o' nine tails.
No,
it's pulling her hair.
Right. But I don't know. I'm just always arguing for more empathy. And I really believe in empathy. So it is frustrating to me that it's like, I think most of us can understand that if we said, I would like to be called X, and then someone's like, okay, why? That it's probably going to feel shitty. And it could be for so many different reasons. I mean, for me, a lot of times it's about privacy, or it's about, you called me Joey Hardcore, which, cool. But it's like Joey Hardcore was a name I used in a roller derby scenario. And if I went into roller derby and someone called me something other than Joey Hardcore, that would feel disrespectful. Because it's like, no, but I use this name as flagging that I belong here. And calling me something else is basically saying that I don't belong here, or you don't see me as part of this organization.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just not a hard concept for me. And it's so strange that we feel like we get to judge what other people should or should not be called, rather than them getting to make the determination for themselves.
That's why I always use the expression "our president," because whether you like him or not, he's our president.
Sad but true. Sad but true.
So what do you think is the most toxic idea out there regarding politics and sex in our culture?
I mean, I think one of the most toxic ideas about sex is just that it's anybody's business.
Okay.
I get very frustrated. Like, do you remember when there was that weird, like, scandal about the dude with the Bigfoot erotica?
Yeah.
I forget who he was. I know he was just some, like, right-wing dude who I didn't like and thought was shitty. But, like, everybody got so fixated on the fact that he seemed to care a lot about Bigfoot's penis and the mating habits of Bigfoot and all of this. And it was this huge joke. And I wrote a piece where I was like, why are you talking about this instead of the fact that he's a white supremacist? Like, why are you...
Wait a minute. You're sitting here talking about empathy, and some guy who's just a Republican is a white supremacist?
No, I think he actually was.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure, like, he had some, like, actual whites. It wasn't just that he was a Republican.
Okay.
There were, like, actual white supremacist ties in some capacity. Because he definitely was more than just, like, run-of-the-mill Republican. And... I was just like, you're distracting from the actually disturbing parts of his record. And now you are communicating to other people who maybe like this for whatever reason that this is something they should be ashamed of.
Or like whatever weird sex.
Whatever weird. Right. It's just like, it bothers me when we make somebody. It's the same thing with like the fucking P tape. I don't care if it exists. I don't care. I mean, yes, if somebody's trying to hide something, if there's like a larger story about whatever, like, sure. But like this idea that, somebody paid sex workers to pee on a thing. I'm like, I don't care. And I think this idea that in itself is funny or worthy of mockery is really harmful.
Well, I think it's kind of like, look at romance novels, right?
Mm-hmm.
So sex with Bigfoot is weird and crazy.
Yeah.
Sex with a pirate
or a
vampire. That's just normal. So,
right.
I guess because Bigfoot's not human, ostensibly, but
right.
still,
but neither are vampires,
right? Well, these lines that are being drawn are much more arbitrary than people think. Even though they think it's obvious to them, it's like if you think about it for 2 seconds, it's not really that clear cut,
right? And I think everybody has this idea, like, you can determine what somebody's actually like from what they're into sexually, and you can't.
That is so. It's this idea that like, I went on a date, she likes the same music I do, therefore we're gonna be compatible. That's never true.
Yeah. But there'll be things where it's like, he's into he's into rape porn. Or there was somebody who like left a tentacle porn thing open. Everyone's like,
Kurt Eichenwild.
Yeah, I was like, who cares?
Well, no, the reason that was a thing is because he lied.
Oh, yeah.
So he said, this is what happened, and we're going to end on this disturbing note.
Okay.
He was talking about something, and he took a screen cap.
Right,
And
I
one
do
of the
remember
tabs was of tentacle porn hentai,
Yeah.
rather. And then they're like, they blew it up, and they found the exact page, of course, because that's the internet.
Right.
And he was looking at this octopus raping a woman or something, and he goes, oh, here's what happened. See, I told my family that tentacle porn exists, and they didn't believe me. So as a family, we all ended up searching for it. And that's how I ended up on this page. And they're like, no, because they looked for tentacle. Like, to get to that specific page actually took work. It's not just Google tentacle porn.
Right.
So he was lying badly about, you like tentacle porn? Knock yourself out, Kurt, which he did because he has epilepsy, supposedly. But it's like, first of all, it's much more disturbing, the idea that, like, I'm just going to get the kids around and we're going to search for any kind of porn on the computer as a family.
Okay, yes. But I don't know. The fact that it was the fact that people cared enough to begin with to make an issue of it is, for me, it's like, who cares?
Oh, yeah, right.
Right, that was the thing, like, to even talk about, oh my God, because it's just like, well, whatever.
What are you, Japanese? Yeah, it's a Japanese thing.
Sometimes you look at tentacle porn.
Yeah. 8 times.
I mean, I actually don't, but one could.
Yeah, you used to cover porn professionally. You never saw tentacle porn?
I've seen it, but I just mean, like, it's not in my personal wheelhouse of things that I'm seeking out.
Okay. On that sticky note, Lux Alptraum.
Are tentacles sticky?
Yeah, they have the suction cups.
True.
Yeah, of course. And they have taste buds on them. So we're going to have a cephalopod episode at one point. Lux Alptraum, the new book's called Faking It. Thank you so much, and I will see you all next week. You are welcome.